The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the cramped break room of Meridian Solutions, casting everything in that sickly corporate glow that made even fresh food look processed. Jake Martinez sat alone at the corner table, unwrapping his homemade turkey sandwich with the methodical precision of someone who'd learned to savor small pleasures. At 23, he was still finding his footing in the world of cubicles and quarterly reports, his business degree from a state school barely enough to land him this unpaid internship at a mid-tier consulting firm in downtown Phoenix. The break room door swung open, and she walked in. Chloe Brennan moved with the kind of casual confidence that came naturally to some people and eluded others entirely. Her auburn hair caught the artificial light as she scanned the vending machines with a frown, patting down the pockets of her navy blazer. Jake had noticed her on her first day 2 weeks ago. How could he not? She was the kind of beautiful that made you forget what you were supposed to be doing, with green eyes that seemed to hold secrets and a smile that felt like a personal invitation. "Shit," she muttered under her breath, checking her purse one more time. Jake looked up from his sandwich. "Everything okay?" She turned, and for a moment he wondered if she even knew who he was. They'd exchanged maybe 10 words since she'd started as a junior analyst, mostly polite nods in the hallway and brief hellos by the coffee machine. "Left my wallet at home," she said, her shoulders sagging slightly. "And apparently this place doesn't take Apple Pay. Who knew we were still living in 2015? Without thinking, Jake stood up and walked over to his lunch bag, pulling out the second sandwich his mom had packed for him that morning. His mother, Rosa, still treated him like he was heading off to elementary school, insisting he needed backup food, just in case. He'd always felt a little embarrassed by her overprotectiveness, but right now, he was grateful for it. "Here," he said, holding out the wrapped sandwich. "Turkey and Swiss. Nothing fancy, but it'll keep you from starving." Chloe looked at the offering, then at his face, as if trying to determine whether this was some kind of joke. "I can't take your lunch." "It's fine. I've got another one." He gestured toward his table where the first sandwich sat half-eaten. "My mom still packs like I'm going on a 3-day hike." A genuine smile spread across her face, transforming her from merely beautiful to something that made Jake's chest tighten. "Your mom packs your lunch? That's actually really sweet." "Yeah, well, she worries I'll waste away to nothing on my intern salary, which is 0, so technically she's not wrong." Chloe laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Okay, but I owe you, and I mean really owe you, not just thanks so much, and then we pretend this never happened. You don't owe me anything. Just eat the sandwich before you pass out and make me look bad for not sharing." They ended up sitting together, and what started as a simple gesture evolved into an hour of conversation that felt effortless. Chloe told him about growing up in Scottsdale, about her marketing degree from ASU, about how she'd taken this job because her father knew someone who knew someone. Jake found himself talking about things he rarely shared: his mother's late-night shifts as a hotel housekeeper, his father's construction job, how he was the first in his family to graduate college. "You know what's funny?" Chloe said, crumpling up the sandwich wrapper. "I was actually dreading coming in today. New job jitters, you know? But this was exactly what I needed." Jake felt something warm bloom in his chest. "Glad I could help." "Jake Martinez," she said, as if testing how his name sounded. "I'm going to remember this." The next morning, Jake found himself checking his phone every few minutes, though he couldn't quite explain why. He and Chloe had exchanged numbers before heading back to work, ostensibly so she could pay him back for the sandwich. But there had been something in the way she'd saved his contact, with a little smile and a comment about how she was bad at keeping in touch, but would try to be better. His phone buzzed just before 10. "Coffee run in 20? I still owe you, and the break room stuff tastes like burnt sadness." Jake stared at the message for a full 30 seconds, reading it 3 times to make sure he wasn't imagining things. He typed and deleted 4 different responses before settling on something that hopefully sounded casual. "Sure. The place across the street isn't terrible. Perfect. Meet you by the elevators." The coffee shop was one of those generic chains that had colonized every office building in America, but Chloe made it feel special just by being there. She ordered some complicated drink with oat milk and extra shots, while Jake stuck with black coffee, partly because he liked it that way, and partly because his checking account was running on fumes. "So tell me, Chloe said as they found a small table by the window. What's the real story with Jake Martinez, the unauthorized biography? Pretty boring stuff. Born in Tucson, moved here for college, stayed because I couldn't afford to move anywhere else. You? Scottsdale princess seeks meaning in corporate America, she said with mock drama. Also pretty boring, but with better zip codes. But as they talked, Jake realized she was selling herself short. Beneath the polished exterior and easy confidence, Chloe was sharp, funny, and surprisingly self-aware. She told him about the pressure she felt to live up to her father's expectations, about how she sometimes felt like she was playing a role she'd never auditioned for. "Can I ask you something?" she said, stirring her drink absently. "Do you ever feel like you're the only real person in that office? Like everyone else is just performing?" Jake knew exactly what she meant. Every day. "Sometimes I feel like I need subtitles to understand what people are actually saying." Right? Like when Henderson says, "Let's circle back on that," he really means "I wasn't listening, and I'm hoping you'll forget you asked." They both laughed, and Jake felt that same warm sensation from the day before, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Their coffee meetings became a routine. Every morning at 10, they'd escape the suffocating atmosphere of Meridian Solutions and spend 20 minutes pretending they were just two people who happened to like each other's company, not a broke intern and a junior analyst navigating the Byzantine politics of corporate America. Jake found himself living for these moments. Chloe would text him little observations throughout the day, comments about their co-workers, funny things she'd overheard, photos of particularly unappetizing vending machine options. He'd respond with his own observations, and gradually they developed their own private language of inside jokes and shared frustrations. "Did you see Peterson's tie today? It looks like a Jackson Pollock painting threw up on a rainbow. I'm pretty sure the printer in the copy room is actually a portal to hell. It just made a sound like a dying whale. Emergency chocolate needed. Conference room B. Send backup." The messages came at all hours, and Jake found himself smiling at his phone in ways that would have embarrassed him if anyone had noticed. But nobody at Meridian Solutions paid much attention to interns, which suited him fine. 3 weeks into their friendship, if that's what it was, Chloe suggested they grab lunch at the diner down the street. It was a greasy spoon place called Mel's that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. But the food was decent, and cheap enough that Jake could afford to split the check without having to eat ramen for the rest of the week. "So I have to ask," Chloe said as they slid into a cracked leather booth. "Are you always this nice to everyone, or am I special?" The question caught Jake off guard. There was something in her tone, a lightness that seemed to mask a more serious inquiry. "I don't know. I guess I try to be decent to people. That's not what I meant." She leaned forward slightly, and Jake caught a hint of her perfume, something subtle and expensive that made him think of spring mornings. "I mean, you've been really good to me these past few weeks, making sure I don't starve, keeping me sane with your commentary on office politics. I just wondered if this is how you are with everyone, or if there's something more to it." Jake felt his face flush. The honest answer was that he'd never felt this way about anyone before. This combination of attraction and genuine affection that made him want to text her good morning and good night, that made him rehearse conversations in his head before having them. But saying that felt like crossing a line he wasn't sure he was allowed to cross. "You're definitely special," he said finally, trying to keep his voice light. "I don't share my mom's sandwiches with just anyone." Chloe smiled, but there was something different about it, something that made Jake's heart race and his palms sweat. "Good," she said simply. They ordered burgers and fries, and the conversation flowed as easily as it always did. Chloe told him about her college roommate who'd become a yoga instructor in Portland, about her sister who was getting married in the fall, about how she'd always wanted to travel but never seemed to find the time. Jake shared stories about his older brother who was serving overseas, about his grandmother who'd raised 5 kids on her own after his grandfather died young, about how he sometimes felt guilty for having opportunities his parents never had. "You know what I love about you?" Chloe said as they waited for the check. "You're genuine, like actually genuine, not fake genuine. It's refreshing." "As opposed to what?" "Most guys I know, they're always trying to impress me or sell me something. Even when they're being nice, there's this underlying agenda. But with you, it just feels easy, natural. Jake wasn't sure how to respond to that. Part of him wanted to point out that he definitely had an agenda, that he'd been thinking about asking her out for weeks but hadn't worked up the courage. Another part of him wanted to just enjoy the compliment without complicating things. "Well," he said finally, "you make it easy to be genuine." That evening, Jake lay in his narrow bed in the studio apartment he shared with 2 roommates, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of their lunch. The way Chloe had looked at him when she called him genuine, the way she'd let her hand brush against his when she'd reached for the ketchup, the way she'd said good when he'd called her special. He was probably reading too much into it. Chloe was beautiful, educated, from a wealthy family. She could have her pick of guys. Successful guys with real jobs and 401ks and cars that weren't held together with duct tape and hope. What would she want with a broke intern who still lived like a college student and had never owned a suit that wasn't borrowed? But then his phone buzzed with a text from her. "Thanks for lunch today. I had a really good time." And then, 30 seconds later, "Sleep well, Jake." He stared at those words until his eyes burned, trying to decode their meaning. Was this how she texted everyone? Was he overthinking a simple pleasantry? Or was there something more there? Something that justified the hope that was building in his chest like pressure in a steam pipe. The next morning, Jake arrived at the office early, as he always did. The building was mostly empty except for the security guard and a few dedicated overachievers, and he liked the quiet before the storm of another day at Meridian Solutions. He'd claimed a desk in the corner of the bullpen, far from the important people, but close enough to the coffee machine to make regular caffeine runs feasible. He was reviewing quarterly reports when his phone buzzed. A message from Chloe, but instead of her usual morning greeting, there was just a sad face emoji. Jake immediately typed back, "Everything okay?" No response. At 10 o'clock, their usual coffee time, Jake waited by the elevators. 10:15 came and went, then 10:30. He sent another text. "Rain check on coffee?" Nothing. By lunchtime, Jake was genuinely worried. It wasn't like Chloe to go radio silent, especially not after their conversation the day before. He walked past her cubicle, a real cubicle with walls and everything, not like his folding table setup, but it was empty. "She called in sick," said Janet from HR, who happened to be walking by with a stack of papers. "Something about food poisoning." Jake felt a mix of relief and concern. Food poisoning was awful, but at least it explained the silence. He thought about texting her again, maybe offering to bring soup or medicine, but decided that might be crossing into stalker territory. Instead, he sent a simple, "Feel better. Let me know if you need anything." Again, no response. The next morning, Jake practically sprinted to the office, eager to see how Chloe was feeling. But when he passed her cubicle, it was still empty. According to Janet, she was still out sick. This time, Jake did text her. "Still feeling rough? Been worried about you?" His phone buzzed almost immediately. "Thanks for checking. Still pretty awful. Probably back tomorrow." It was the first time she'd responded to any of his messages in 2 days, and Jake felt ridiculously relieved. "Take care of yourself. The office isn't the same without you. You're sweet. Talk soon." But Thursday came, and Chloe still wasn't back. Jake was starting to wonder if something more serious was going on when he spotted her walking through the lobby just before noon. She looked different. Her hair was styled in loose waves instead of her usual ponytail, and she was wearing a dress Jake had never seen before. Something navy blue and form-fitting that probably cost more than Jake made in a month. "Chloe!" he called out, jogging to catch up with her at the elevator bank. She turned, and for a moment her expression was completely blank, as if she didn't recognize him. Then she smiled, but it wasn't the warm, genuine smile he'd grown accustomed to. This one felt practiced, professional. "Oh, hey Jake, how's it going?" The casual tone threw him off. After days of worry and unanswered texts, he'd expected more of a reunion. "I was worried about you. Food poisoning sounds awful." "Yeah, it was pretty rough." She was looking at her phone instead of at him, fingers moving across the screen with quick, efficient taps. "But I'm feeling much better now." The elevator arrived, and they stepped in together. Jake waited for her to say something more, to acknowledge their friendship or thank him for checking on her. But Chloe seemed absorbed in whatever was on her phone. "So," Jake said finally, "coffee later? I feel like we have some catching up to do." Chloe looked up, and there was something in her expression Jake couldn't quite read. Actually, I'm pretty swamped today, trying to catch up on everything I missed. Right, of course. Maybe tomorrow? Maybe. We'll see how things go. The elevator opened on the 3rd floor, and Chloe stepped out without another word. Jake rode up to the 5th floor feeling confused and slightly hurt. He understood that she'd been sick and probably had a lot of work to catch up on. But the coldness in her manner was completely at odds with how things had been between them just a few days earlier. By 3 o'clock, Jake couldn't concentrate on anything. He kept glancing toward the stairwell, hoping to catch a glimpse of Chloe, but she didn't appear. Finally, he sent a text. "Everything okay? You seemed kind of distant earlier." This time the response came quickly. "Just busy. Talk later." But later never came. Jake stayed at his desk until nearly 7, long after most people had gone home, but Chloe never materialized. When he finally gave up and headed for the elevator, he ran into Marcus from accounting. "Working late?" Marcus asked, juggling a coffee cup and a stack of folders. "Yeah, trying to get ahead on some projects. You?" "Month-end closing. The glamorous life of a number cruncher." Marcus grinned. "Hey, speaking of glamorous, did you see Chloe today? Girl was looking fine. I mean, she always looks good, but today was next level." Jake felt something twist in his stomach. "Yeah, I saw her briefly. Lucky bastard who gets to take her out." Marcus winked. "Though I heard she's already got her eye on someone upstairs, if you know what I mean." "What do you mean?" Marcus glanced around conspiratorially, then leaned closer. "Word is, she's been spending some quality time with Henderson. You know, the regional supervisor? Guy's got that whole silver fox thing going on." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. Richard Henderson was in his early 40s, divorced, and drove a BMW that probably cost more than Jake's parents made in 2 years. He was also Chloe's direct supervisor. "That's just office gossip," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Maybe, but I saw them leaving together yesterday evening. Real cozy-like. He was holding the car door open for her and everything." The elevator arrived, and Jake stepped in mechanically. As the doors closed, he caught sight of his reflection in the polished metal. Pale, stricken, looking every bit the naive kid he suddenly felt like. Friday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching Jake's mood perfectly. He'd spent most of the night staring at his phone, composing and deleting messages to Chloe, trying to find words that would somehow make sense of what he was feeling. Hurt, confused, betrayed, though he wasn't sure he had any right to feel betrayed. They'd never defined what was between them, never made any promises or commitments, but it had felt like something. All those conversations, all those shared moments, the way she'd looked at him when she called him genuine, it had all felt like the beginning of something real. Jake arrived at the office to find a buzz of activity unusual for a Friday morning. People were clustered around computers, whispering in small groups, passing phones back and forth with the kind of furtive energy that suggested scandal. "Did you see it?" asked Tim from IT, practically bouncing with excitement as he approached Jake's desk. "See what?" Tim glanced around, then pulled out his phone. "Someone posted this in the company group chat last night. Well, technically they posted it and then deleted it real quick, but you know how screenshots work." He showed Jake his phone screen. It was a photo of what appeared to be a receipt or reservation confirmation. The image was slightly blurry, obviously taken in haste, but Jake could make out enough details to understand why it had caused such a stir. The Paradise Inn, a reservation for Friday night, a corporate credit card authorization, and 2 names, R. Henderson and C. Brennan. Jake stared at the screen until the letters seemed to blur together. The Paradise Inn was a notorious no-tell motel on the outskirts of Phoenix, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Everyone in the office knew about it because it had been the subject of jokes and innuendo for years. "Holy shit, right?" Tim was practically vibrating with glee. "I mean, everyone knew something was going on, but this is some next-level drama." Jake handed the phone back without a word. He felt nauseated, hollow, like someone had reached into his chest and scooped out everything vital. "You okay, man? You look like you're about to puke." "I'm fine," Jake managed. "Just tired." But he wasn't fine. As the morning wore on and the whispers continued, Jake felt like he was underwater, watching the world through a distorted lens. Every conversation seemed to be about Chloe and Henderson. Every laugh felt directed at him, the stupid intern who'd thought he had a chance with the beautiful analyst. Just before lunch, Jake saw her. Chloe emerged from the elevator, looking composed and professional, as if nothing had changed. She walked past his desk without acknowledging him, her heels clicking against the tile floor with rhythmic precision. Jake waited until she was settled in her cubicle, then walked over on unsteady legs. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Chloe looked up from her computer, and for just a moment, Jake saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it was gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "I'm really busy right now, Jake. It'll just take a minute." She glanced around, obviously aware that people were watching. "Fine, conference room C, 5 minutes." The small conference room was empty and quiet, a refuge from the barely contained chaos of the main office. Jake closed the door behind them and tried to organize his thoughts, but all he could think about was that receipt. Those two names paired together like some cosmic joke. "Is it true?" he asked finally. Chloe crossed her arms defensively. "Is what true?" "The motel, Henderson. All of it." For a long moment she didn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold and distant. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Everyone's talking about it, Chloe. There's a screenshot of the reservation." "Office gossip. You know how people are." Jake felt something break inside him. Not just his heart, though that was definitely shattered, but something deeper, his faith in his own judgment, his belief that he could read people and situations accurately. "So nothing's going on between you and Henderson?" Chloe's jaw tightened. "My personal life is none of your business, Jake. I thought we were friends." "We are friends, but that doesn't mean I owe you explanations about who I spend my time with." The word friends hit Jake like a physical blow. Friends. Casual, meaningless, interchangeable. Not the connection he'd thought they had, not the foundation for something more. "Right," he said quietly. "Friends." "Jake, no, it's fine. You're absolutely right. We're just friends, and friends don't get to judge each other's choices." He turned to leave, but Chloe's voice stopped him. "It's not what you think." Jake turned back, and for a moment he saw the woman he'd shared lunches with, the one who'd called him genuine, and made him believe he might be worth something to someone like her. Then what is it? But whatever vulnerability he'd glimpsed was gone, replaced by that professional mask he was beginning to hate. "It's complicated. Everything's complicated, Chloe. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now." Jake nodded slowly. "Okay, well, thanks for the clarity." He left the conference room feeling emptied out, like a house after a fire, still standing but fundamentally damaged. The rest of the day passed in a blur of spreadsheets and emails, routine tasks that required no emotional investment. At 5:30, Jake was packing up his things when he heard familiar voices near the elevator. He looked up to see Henderson and Chloe standing close together, her hand resting lightly on his arm as they talked in low voices. Henderson was tall and distinguished-looking, with graying temples and the kind of expensive suit that spoke of success and stability. Everything Jake wasn't. As Jake watched, Henderson placed his hand on the small of Chloe's back, guiding her toward the elevator with casual possessiveness. She didn't pull away. If anything, she seemed to lean into his touch. The elevator doors closed, and they were gone. Jake sat back down at his desk, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. Around him, the office gradually emptied as people headed home to their real lives, their families, and dinner plans and weekend adventures. Jake remained at his desk, not because he had work to do, but because he couldn't face the thought of going home to his cramped apartment and his oblivious roommates. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "How was your day, mijo? Did you eat lunch?" Jake stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "It was fine, Mom. Yes, I ate. Good. I made tamales. Come by this weekend and I'll send some home with you. Thanks, I will. Love you. Love you too." Jake put his phone away and sat in the gathering darkness of the empty office, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic on the street below. Somewhere in the city, Chloe was probably getting ready for dinner with Henderson, choosing jewelry and perfume for a man who could give her things Jake never could. The worst part wasn't the betrayal or the humiliation. The worst part was the growing realization that maybe this was just how the world worked. Maybe Jake had been naive to think that sharing sandwiches and coffee dates meant anything in the face of power and money and status. Maybe the connection he'd felt with Chloe had been entirely one-sided, a fantasy he'd constructed out of kindness and proximity. The following Monday brought news that Henderson had received a formal reprimand from corporate. Apparently, someone had forwarded the screenshot to the regional director, and while the company couldn't prove anything inappropriate had occurred, the appearance of impropriety was enough to warrant disciplinary action. Henderson spent the day in closed-door meetings with HR and upper management, emerging looking grim and professional. When asked about the situation by curious coworkers, he maintained that it was all a misunderstanding, that the reservation had been for a legitimate business purpose that had been misinterpreted. Chloe, meanwhile, seemed completely unaffected by the controversy swirling around her. She went about her work with the same professional demeanor she'd adopted since returning from her mysterious illness, polite but distant with everyone, including Jake. The office gossip machine, deprived of new developments, gradually moved on to other scandals and speculations. But Jake found himself unable to let go of what had happened, not because he was holding on to hope that had died in the conference room, but because he couldn't reconcile the woman who had shared her thoughts and fears with him over coffee with the woman who could lie to his face without flinching. 3 months later, Jake submitted his resignation to Meridian Solutions. He'd been offered a paid position at a larger firm across town, a real job with benefits and a salary that would allow him to move out of his shared apartment and maybe even start building something resembling a career. His last day was a Friday in late September. Most of his coworkers had said their goodbyes throughout the week, awkward handshakes and promises to stay in touch that everyone knew were hollow. Jake cleaned out his desk methodically, packing his few personal items into a cardboard box that seemed pathetically small given the months he'd spent at that corner table. He was almost finished when Chloe appeared beside his desk. "So you're really leaving," she said. Jake looked up from his packing. It was the first time she'd spoken directly to him in weeks. "Yeah, new opportunity. That's great. Really, you deserve something better than this place." There was something in her voice, a softness that reminded him of their early conversations. But Jake had learned not to trust those moments of apparent vulnerability. "Thanks," he said simply. "Jake, She paused, glancing around the mostly empty office. "I want you to know that I never meant for things to get so complicated." "Things weren't complicated, Chloe. You made a choice. It's fine." "It's not fine. I can see that it hurt you, and I'm sorry for that." Jake sealed the box with packing tape, the sound sharp in the quiet space. "It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me." Finally, Jake looked at her directly. She was still beautiful, still poised, but there was something different in her expression, an uncertainty he'd never seen before. "Why?" he asked. "Why does it matter to you?" Chloe opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. For a moment, Jake thought she might actually tell him the truth, whatever that was. But then the professional mask slipped back into place. "I just wanted you to know that I valued our friendship, that it meant something to me." Jake nodded slowly. "Okay. Well, take care of yourself, Chloe." He picked up his box and walked toward the elevator, feeling her eyes on his back but not turning around. The elevator doors opened, and Jake stepped inside, watching Chloe's figure grow smaller as the doors closed between them. The new job was everything Jake had hoped for, and more. The work was challenging, the pay was decent, and his colleagues treated him like a professional rather than a disposable intern. He found an apartment in a better part of town, made friends who shared his interests, and slowly began to build the kind of life he'd always imagined for himself. 6 months into his new position, Jake was reviewing his email when he noticed a message from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "Congratulations and a favor." He almost deleted it as spam, but something about the phrasing made him hesitate. He clicked it open and felt his stomach drop as he read the sender's name, Chloe Brennan. "Hi, Jake. I hope this message finds you well. I heard through the grapevine that you've been doing amazing things at Morrison & Associates. That's fantastic news, and I'm so happy for you. I know this might seem presumptuous given how things ended between us, but I was wondering if you might be willing to help me out. I'm looking to make a career change, and Morrison & Associates has exactly the kind of opportunities I'm seeking. I was hoping you might be able to put in a good word for me, or let me know if there are any openings that might be a good fit. I know I don't have the right to ask this of you, especially considering how things went at Meridian. But you always struck me as someone who believed in giving people second chances, and I'm hoping that's still true. I'd be happy to buy you coffee and catch up properly if you're open to it. I feel like we left things unfinished, and I'd like the chance to explain myself if you're willing to listen. Best regards, Chloe P.S. I still think about those sandwiches your mom packed. She raised a good man. Jake read the email 3 times, his emotions cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been pity. The casual way she referenced their past, the assumption that he would be willing to help her despite everything that had happened, it was breathtaking in its audacity. He closed the email without responding and tried to focus on his work, but the message nagged at him throughout the day. By evening, he'd composed and deleted a dozen different responses, ranging from polite refusal to scorching rejection. Finally, he settled on something simple. Chloe, thanks for reaching out. I'm glad to hear you're looking for new opportunities. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm in a position to help with recommendations at this time. I wish you the best of luck in your search. Jake. He sent the message before he could second-guess himself, then closed his laptop and went for a walk in the desert air of his new neighborhood. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded him of better times, simpler times, when he'd believed that kindness and connection were enough to bridge any gap. His phone buzzed with a response almost immediately. I understand. Thank you for being honest with me. I hope someday you'll let me buy you that coffee and explain what really happened. You deserve to know the truth. Take care of yourself, Jake. You were always too good for that place. Jake deleted the message without responding. Whatever truth Chloe thought she had to offer, whatever explanation might make sense of her behavior, he no longer needed to hear it. He'd learned to live with the questions, to accept that some stories don't have satisfying endings, that some people remain mysteries no matter how much you think you know them. As he walked through the quiet streets of his neighborhood, Jake thought about the man he'd become over the past year. Stronger, more cautious, less willing to mistake kindness for something deeper. It wasn't the person he'd imagined becoming when he was 23 and believed that good intentions were enough to navigate the complexities of adult relationships. But maybe that was okay. Maybe growing up meant learning to protect yourself without becoming cynical, to remain open to genuine connection while recognizing its counterfeit. Maybe the real lesson wasn't about Chloe at all, but about his own worth, not as someone who could provide something useful, but as someone deserving of honesty and respect. Jake's phone stayed silent for the rest of the evening, and he was grateful for that silence. Some conversations were better left unfinished, some bridges better left burned. The sandwich he'd shared that first day had been an act of simple human kindness, nothing more and nothing less. What Chloe had chosen to do with that kindness said nothing about him and everything about her. In the distance, the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars, full of possibility and promise. Jake walked toward them, leaving the shadows of his past behind him, carrying only the lessons that would help him recognize real love when it finally found him. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the space to show you exactly who they are.